Hi, and welcome to Piano Teaching Success Q&A. I'm Gillian Erskine, and together with my colleague Paul Myatt, we've put this program together for you so you can get answers to your questions. We're so excited to be here today with our lovely guests and to have piano teachers from around the world watching our show. Let us know in the chat where you're watching us from. Well, let me introduce our panel for today. Dorothy Chia is the author of Piano Pedagogy Series for Teachers and Theory Explorer books for young students. She holds a master's degree in music and piano performance and piano pedagogy from the University of Michigan. Dorothy is actively involved in working with piano teachers in Singapore and Malaysia through her workshops and YouTube channel. Welcome, Dorothy.
Thank you for having me in the show, and hello to all the teachers around the world.
That's great. Thank you, Dorothy. It's great to have you here. Leonie Cohen is a Sydney-based jazz pianist, composer and piano teacher. Since completing the jazz course at the Sydney Con, she's recorded for the ABC and received commissions from the Sydney Opera House. Leonie is passionate about teaching and particularly loves introducing jazz to pianists of all ages and levels of playing piano. Welcome, Leonie.
Thank you very much, Gillian. What a delight to be here, and hello all that are watching.
It looks a bit cold in Sydney today.
Look, I try to be brave and wear something less cozy, but it's cold.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, our next guest is Stuart Storer. Stuart is an AOB Rock School examiner, a Forte school owner and class teacher. Stuart taught and composer. Stuart taught his two kids, who both went on to teach and attain diplomas in more than one instrument. Stuart plays bass in the and other instruments, I believe, in the family rock band, which guest stars, amongst other places, at their annual Forte Festival in front of hundreds of students and their families. Welcome, Stuart.
Thank you, Gillian, and hello, everyone. Fantastic to be here. Thank you for having me, and hello to everyone from around the world.
Our pleasure. Well, like we do each week, we're going to kick today's show off by visiting each of our panelists in their home studios, so you can see their setup and ask any questions you might have. So let's start with Dorothy. Dorothy, you live in Singapore.
Right.
Here we go. This is where Singapore is for everybody around the world.
And you have to zoom in, and there you see it.
Right on that little spot there. How many people are in Singapore? Is it about 5 million?
Yes, 5 million, 5.8 million, and we're still growing. And so it's a very metropolitan, multicultural city-state.
Yes, yes. Well, tell us about your studio, Dorothy.
Okay, I have 3 studios.
Oh.
And right now we are at phase 2 of the opening up. And so I've only opened up 2. So the studio you're seeing now, this is at Potong Pasir. And this picture is special because I was visited by the news crew that came and did a report on video teaching.
Wow.
Right.
That's great.
And this is my setup. So this one is another studio. It's in Woodlands. So Woodlands is on the north of Singapore. It's where the causeway that connects Singapore to Malaysia is. So it's on the northern part of Singapore. And just now, Potong Pasir is more central.
If we go back to that other one where you're doing the online teaching, what kind of setup do you have there?
Okay, I use my MacBook, and I do toggle between my MacBook and my iPad and iPhone. And sometimes students need a second view, so I will just hold my iPhone and screen share, so I will just shoot from above the piano. But most of my students are intermediate, so they don't really need the overhead view, so they will just see me from the side view.
And what do you use your iPad for?
iPad is very useful, especially when you're checking a student's theory or to do some analysis of the score. So I will screenshot and I will share the structure, the harmony, and we look at the score together.
That's a good idea. And your phone, if you just need that second view of the overhead
view of the hands.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Well, Leonie lives in Sydney, and we're going to show you a map. We've got a few map of that, aren't we? Yes, yes. So Leonie lives in Sydney, and so let's visit Leonie in her studio. Leonie, is she there? There we go. So Leonie, can you take us through your studio?
Most certainly. It's changed of recent times, COVID times. I've got my Yamaha upright, which I usually teach from, but if you see a little bit to the right of it, I've set up a keyboard, so I'm more distance from my students. And on top of my grand, I've set up a stand so I can actually do bird's eye view when I'm doing Zoom lessons. And blessed that we can do Zoom lessons. Wow.
Yes.
Oh, and most importantly is the studio dog, Billy Bebop.
What is he? I thought he was a cat.
She, believe it or not, confession, we did a DNA, a mix of Pommy, miniature poodle, terrier, cattle dog. It's about that size.
Oh, that's great. Terrific. Well, are you back to face-to-face teaching, Leonie?
Look, I am. I'm probably about half-half. I've been doing it with masks on because I teach at 2 schools as well as home, and it's been working a treat. It's fine. The kids and the parents have been really up for it as well. And yeah, I'm back to my full load, which is wonderful.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific. Well, I'd like to welcome a few people from Singapore before we go any further. We've got, East Malaysia, we've got Phyllis, and I think we've got Susanna from Singapore, and we've got Cynthia Delaney from the Whit Sundays, and we've got Christine from, I think, yes, the Sunshine Coast. I think it might be even Noosa Heads, Christine, is it? And Jeanette from Brisbane, and Heather from Shoalhaven Heads in New South Wales. So Janet Silverton from Sydney. Well, that's great to see some people. Oh, and we've got someone from the USA. We've got Luann from Dalton in Georgia, I guess, GA. It's fantastic. Jenny from Warragul, Victoria. Yeah, so we've got, and Beth from Ohio in the USA. That's fantastic. Thank you. It's so great to have our visitors from piano teachers from all over the world here with us today. That's fantastic. Well, let's move on to Stuart. Stuart, you live in Adelaide. Paul, let's have that map. So we know where Adelaide is. It's kind of in the middle down the bottom. Oh, kind of, not quite in the middle. Yeah. There we go. That's where Adelaide is. And it's a bit cold down there too, isn't it?
We're in the middle of winter. August is traditionally our coldest month, and they are actually forecasting snow for the weekend. Only on the higher ground, so I'm not sure whether I'll actually qualify for any snow, but I'd rather not. I'd prefer not to have it.
Yeah. Well, it had snow in Tasmania yesterday.
They did, apparently, yes.
The first time since 1961 or something like that. So it's cold down there, but it usually doesn't snow.
It's very cold in Adelaide at the moment.
Oh, I see. Well, let's have a look at your classroom. And actually, we've got a little treat for everybody because we're going to see Stuart in action teaching a class.
I want to hear you say the cha-cha-cha. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ready? Move the camera and.
But that would have been, that's like a very beginning piece, isn't it?
That's only their second lesson. They started last week, and there's actually yesterday was only their second lesson, and it was fantastic to see them all perfectly in time. They're singing, they're interacting with each other. As you can see from that, obviously we're back to face-to-face teaching, which we have in Adelaide for quite a number of weeks now. In total, we only had five weeks of online teaching, and then we were able to return face-to-face. So hopefully we can keep that going. That's a class of 5. There's one little girl who's just off camera, so a class of 5.
Oh, that's so good, so good. And are they piano keys or junior keys?
They're junior keys.
All right.
Yeah,
So they're what,
keys.
maybe 5 or
So
something?
that they're 6 years old.
Mm.
Yep.
That's terrific. Well, I mentioned in the intro that Stuart plays music with his kids, and I'd just love to show that this is one of those, this is one of the most wonderful things that I think, unfortunately, can be rare with piano teachers. Sometimes our students, our own children, don't get to grow up to play and enjoy music as much as we do. But so I wanted to show this clip because I think it's just so precious. Here's Stuart playing with his kids. This recording was actually taken 6 years ago when we did a recording to celebrate our 20th anniversary of Forte. But it's still, and you guys still play together. Well, we've got missing ones. Someone's.
We have an absentee. Yes,
Yeah.
she's in Japan. Although when we visited last year in the kindergarten where my daughter is teaching now, we got the kids together and we got the band back together again, and we did a "We Will Rock You" by Queen.
Oh.
So we had the kids using percussion instruments, and they loved it. They had a ball.
They would have.
Yeah.
How great is that? Well, we've got a little clip here now to share with you. So good. And so just share with us what the kids have done on the other instruments.
My daughter achieved her associate diploma in piano and completed her bachelor's degree in education and pedagogy. My son is drums, as you can see. He got as far as grade 7 on piano and has just done his rock school diploma on drums.
Ooh.
And he's now in his final year of an accountancy degree at Adelaide University.
Mm-hmm. That's terrific. Well, let's and the piece that they were playing.
That's the Variations by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it's something that we had to arrange for ourselves. And Lucas on drums was amazing because I asked Lucas, "Would you like the score writing out?" He said, "No, I just listen to it. I'll play it." And so most of it was done just by ear.
Which is, they got killer ears. Great. Well, let's move on to some questions. So when looking at our greatest challenges in teaching piano, many teachers say that teaching reading was their greatest challenge. And this question about reading comes from Jeanette Bird, who's with us today. So that's terrific, Jeanette. Jeanette writes, over many years of teaching, I've only had a few students who have had very little improvement on reading of notation. These few, who happen to be boys, were very good musically. That is, they played their pieces and engaging in an emotional way, but it became too difficult to take them beyond an early advanced level or grade 6 as the reading became too complex. How could I have nurtured them differently to enhance their ability to listen and play by ear or rote? What a fantastic question. Like any good teacher, Jeanette's reflecting on how she might have improved the outcome for these kids and looking at being flexible with her approach going forward. So Dorothy, what suggestions do you have here?
Right. I think if you start them in a good thinking process, because I always think playing the piano or playing any instrument is an eye, that means the visual, reading the notes, and you're processing the sound, that means go through your ear, your hand, your tactile, you're training your hands to respond to the notes, the sound that comes out, and all that processing is then being networked into the brain. So if from the start you are working with young children and you lay that strong foundation of a good process, teach them the thinking process of going from the unknown, the notes on the page, to the known, performing the sound, yeah, and get them excited about that process so that every new piece, they are reinforcing that process. And with young beginners, there is a tendency sometimes, if visual is not their dominant sense, they might rely on their ears. And then that becomes something very easy, and then they just drop all the other senses and they just go by their ears. And I find that at the starting stage, if the beginner teacher is not watching like a hawk, yeah, you have to catch them. Are they using their eyes? Are they finding their notes? Are they practicing their tactile memory? Are they able to write out? And I do test my beginners, especially like on flashcards, and I would use different media. I would use Note Rush on my iPad. I would also make them do the old traditional write out the notes spelling. Yeah. So multi approach to reinforcing note reading and understanding. So once the foundation is laid, then as they move up to more difficult pieces, hopefully that skill is carried forward. Yeah. So very important, the process, but also the pacing. Pacing as in, yes, it's good to challenge the students to read more difficult pieces so that they are always pushed a little bit further. But some culture, and I would say that Chinese parents, yeah, the parents that I work with, Asians, we tend to want to excel. So there might be a tendency, we have to guard that we are always giving music that is within the reach of that student's reading ability. So when they are pushed too much, and that's when the kids will just drop all the other and rely on their dominant sense. So it could be visual, it could be just oral. So pacing and teaching them a good process to move through the senses of playing the music.
Yeah, good points there. Thanks, Dorothy. Leonie, what?
Look, interesting. That's actually my background in terms of not being able to read particularly well. I didn't have comprehensive lessons as a kid, so I missed out on a lot of that reading. I notice with jazz musicians, which I primarily am, the hearing is an absolute dominant very often and necessary. I have gone back in the last couple of decades to nurturing my reading, and my thoughts are perhaps these sixth grade students could continue with their oral abilities, learn by ear, all of that, and if they're into it, perhaps learn little bits of the harder pieces, maybe read little segments, but also to still encourage learning by ear. If they don't have that reading foundation, it's still developable. And the other suggestion I would say is, I think the teacher suggested this has not done anything wrong whatsoever, and perhaps can get them onto more lead sheet reading and understanding chords. So they're different. If their sight reading isn't as high as their other skills, absolutely fine, still developable, maybe just bit by bit.
Very good points there. That's right. We sometimes have to embrace their gifts and talents as well. Stuart.
Yeah, that's a question that I actually relate to very well, because my daughter has a fantastic ear, and she actually admitted in a telephone conversation recently that she actually didn't start reading until she was studying for grade 8. And
were you aware
and she
of
said, I was, but A similar situation to this this teacher's question, which I think is a fantastic question, because clearly these boys in question have got a fantastic ear. They're
Yeah.
playing musically, and they're playing engaging, and they're communicating through their music, which means that, you know, they're obviously hearing it, internalizing it, and they're able then to recreate that, which I think that's a gift in itself. I
Yeah,
really
it's
do. I think that is a gift
musicianship,
in
isn't
itself.
it?
And I think we, you know, sometimes we actually place too much emphasis on the reading. We always need to keep in mind the natural learning process, which is listen, sing, play, read, and write. And reading is at the end. Now, quite often in our teaching, we actually get that process the wrong way around. And I think that, you know, the reading actually does kick in. I'm actually noted for my sight reading skills. And I would like to put on record and confess that I used to be the world's worst sight reader. I really did.
Really?
And now I can sight read virtually anything. And I really think that the more you teach, the better your sight reading becomes, because you have to, you're doing it regularly, you're doing it every day. And I was in conversation with a Suzuki teacher fairly recently. And as everyone's probably aware, Suzuki doesn't place any emphasis on reading notation at all. It's all primarily oral based. And I was actually examining her students, and I noticed obviously that all the lower grades couldn't sight read. When it came to that part of the exam, they couldn't sight read. But the higher grades, from grade 6, grade 7 upwards, played their sight reading almost flawlessly. And I asked the teacher, "What's your secret?" And she said, "Well, did you realize the age of those students?" And I said, "Well, clearly they're older students." She said, "Yes." And she said, "Can I ask you a question? Why don't we let 10, 11, 12-year-olds drive a car?" And the answer to that is not because they can't reach the pedals, it's because their brains haven't developed the ability to scan. And the ability to scan is vital in driving, but it's also coincidentally the ability that we need when we're reading music. And as long as students are actually aware of what the notation means on the page, the fact that they can't read and play it at the same time, I think that's immaterial. I think as long as they can recognize and associate the pictures with the sounds that they're producing, then they're on their way to becoming readers. And I think that teacher's obviously done a fantastic job.
Clearly. So you yourself, let's just backtrack a bit. So when was the crossover? Like, we heard that Leonie went, right, that's it, I'm going to get myself as a better reader, and she just determined that she was going to do that. What about you? Yeah. What was the changeover? How did you change over from a good ear to sight?
I was forced to learn a second instrument through tertiary studies, and I picked up the flute. And in my very first lesson, my flute teacher said, "Okay, the golden rule of any musical playing is you do not stop. And once you start, whether you play every single note wrong, it doesn't matter, but I want the rhythm correct." And I think that's an issue that we can address if we discuss sight reading as well. But also, I think from my perspective, it was self-preservation, because when I first started teaching, a lot of students would actually spend their pocket money on pop song sheet music, which there's no market for these days. They get everything from YouTube. But back in the middle part of last century, dark ages, so to speak, it wasn't uncommon. Students, especially teenagers, they would come along and they'd have the latest pop songs of sheet music. And they'd put that in front of me and they would say, "I'd like to learn this." So obviously I have to be able to play it to be able to teach it. And self-preservation kicks in. You know, you don't want to make a fool of yourself by not being able to sight read in front of these students. And so your sight reading just develops exponentially. It's really incredible how it happens.
I have a thing, because I'm also a very good ear player and not as strong on sight reading. But what role, I think, in sight reading, because I will just look at loud, like if you're a good ear player, you just look at the music and you know what that sounds like. And I just think that could be possibly. Do you think, what role does a good ear play in sight reading?
I think it's important because we have to be able to hear the sounds that we're producing, and also being able to look at something and predict how it's going to sound before we actually play it. That's an important thing. Just by looking at the shape of the music, are the notes ascending? Are they descending? Are they moving stepwise? Are they skipping? Are there wide intervals? But I think correct notation to give sight reading as an example, correct notation is not the be all and end all. Correct rhythm and continuity are the important things. And that's something that students often lack the ability to do. They lack the ability to keep going no matter what. And I liken it to an escalator in a department store. And once you're on that escalator, you cannot get off and you can't backtrack until you hit the next floor. And sight reading is exactly the same. Once that piece of music starts, it doesn't stop until we hit the double bar line. And one thing that I've started doing in my sight reading teaching now is I force students to play their sight reading either to a backing track or to a metronome click. And they're not allowed to stop. They actually get penalized if they stop. They get fined. And
well, that's one of the great things about backing tracks, isn't it?
It works a treat. Yeah, it really does work a treat. Yeah.
It forces them to continue and to move on and to keep on and catch up and find out where it is up to. And then they're going to find out where they're in the music, and it just really, really promotes that.
So it's reading ahead. It's not lingering on mistakes. A mistake happens. It happens in a split second. We move on. And no one's expecting it to be perfect. We're expecting it to be continuous.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that question was really about kids who were obviously had a good ear and therefore probably really good at memorizing. Don't you find those two go together? Everything, because they have a good ear. In contrast, this next question is probably about students who read everything. Our next question is from Pam Grimer or Grimer. I'm not sure what the pronunciation, so sorry in advance if I had that wrong, who asked this question: how do you teach students to memorize pieces? So, Stuart, how do you go about this?
Okay, there are three types of memorization. There's the analytical memorization, there's the photographic memorization, and there's the tactile or muscle memory.
Mechanical.
And to be a successful memorizer, we need to incorporate all three. Now, unfortunately, students incorporate just the first one and they're oblivious to the other two. And the first superficial form of memory is the tactile memory, which is muscle memory, and everything is going along fantastic. It's going along fine until a mistake occurs or a wrong finger occurs, and suddenly the whole thing comes crashing down. So we need to address memorization from a multi-pronged approach, if you like. We need to understand what key we're in. We need to understand the chord structure. We need to understand the melodic, which comes back to the listening, the singing, and the playing, and lots of repetition. Half speed playing as well. Everyone can play from memory at full speed, but if you ask a student, okay, you think you have this memorized, all right, close your book, and how about you try and play it at half speed from memory, and you'll find where all the little holes are.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Well, that's great. Well, what are your suggestions, Dorothy?
Yeah, I think it's, I struggled with memory because when I was in Singapore, from beginner to grade 8, my teacher never made me memorize. I always played with the book. So I was the kind of student that was very good at picking up piece and learning it. So I was very, very on the ball with that. And it was only when I went to the US to study. So I studied 5 years, my bachelor's and my master's in the US. And over there, because I was in the performing major, I had to memorize all my pieces in a very short time. Wow. And so that was a lot of stress, and I had to come up with strategies. And to cope with that, I would create different ideas to test my memory. So I agree with Stuart's method of having the tactile, photographic, and analytical, but I think it's very important just before a performance, to test your memory. So I would break up the piece into smaller bite size and test myself. Am I able to start from the middle? Am I able to play the last chord? Am I able to play the start of the development section? Yeah, and just jump around. So I must know my music very, very well. Another thing that I like to do is to pretend that I made a mistake. So I would play and then stop. And then I will walk around the room, come back to the piano and continue where I stopped playing. So it challenges me to be able to pick up and to be confident enough. So I think is to be very, very confident with that music, and that no matter what happens, you are able to rely that memory is rock solid, that you can pick it up anywhere in the music.
I think that's true. I mean, gosh, I remember myself, you know, back when I was a kid in the Stedford days, and thinking, oh my God, what happens if I make a mistake? What happens when I make a mistake? And of course, you know, you talk yourself into making a mistake when you do that. And then it's like, Whereas if you know that confidence of knowing I can pick this thing up anywhere.
Yes, right. And your confidence is just rock solid. And when your mind thinks you can do it, yes, you can do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really good tips. Leonie, do you have anything to add?
Look, I think they're all excellent answers to that. I think another thing I do to memorize things on top of what's been mentioned is try practice things in as many different ways. As Stuart said, slowly. That will definitely show you the bits that you can work over. I often try do sections without looking. I will, if you've got the time, transpose something. Do it with, you know, lots of background noise. Do it in as many different ways that you can. Analyze it to bits. Students, you know, clearly no one has 38,000 hours in a day to do all that. With students, I will try and balance a lesson with perhaps an easier piece or something by rote so that they do know stuff by memory. And along with backing tracks, duets, just for them to hear a piece all the way through and get used to that experience. Dorothy, your idea of starting halfway through, excellent, and different spots, that's a terrific way as well.
Absolutely. And I think that ability, I just noticed with my own students and my own children, because they've got chords underneath their hands, they have got great ears. Seems if they make a mistake, they just get themselves out of it. I don't know why, but they just were able to. It didn't put them off because I knew they kept that their ear, they're focused on melody and where I'm going, and then everything just worked out. It's really interesting to watch them do that, and it's not just one or two. I see that all of them because they have that underlying fundamentals seem to do that, which is interesting. So I hope there's some tips there for you. Well, as a jazz pianist, Leonie, you have a well-trained ear, or a well-tuned ear anyway. It's probably natural. Did you always have that? I think you just sort of kind of said you did earlier.
Look, I did. My background is this. My mum was a piano teacher, pianist, and way back when I was a little person, she ran group classes, and we were in South Africa at the time. We migrated when I was 4, and I just have this memory of a little 3-year-old waltzing around the room looking at all the older students. But yeah, I've always been able to pick out things by ear and thoroughly enjoyed it. And in a way, we moved a lot, so I didn't get regular diligent practice in and work through it all. In a way, it's absolutely enhanced my ear. And I also thought, particularly in teenage years, if I hear something, I can work out anything. And you know what? I was completely wrong. It was completely wrong. It was more the process of, if I hear something, I can try work out anything. And the more you do, the better
you get at it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Did your mum teach you?
Mum didn't officially teach me, but from, unfortunately she passed away 7 years ago, but even as an adult, I would always love getting feedback for her. And she did all the motherly stuff, nurturing and encouraging, but she was also very honest with her feedback for it. So unofficially she taught me, and yeah, it was absolutely awesome.
Oh, that's terrific. Well, I just want to show a clip of when I first saw Leonie. It was on Facebook. And Leonie was in a casual moment with friends and just enjoying the moment. And I just think that this is kind of the essence of what we all aim for with our students. So we've got a little video clip here that we've been able to dig out.
Can you bring it tomorrow to the National Park?
So tell us how that moment came about, Leonie.
Oh, look, I'd been to see a show at a theatre in Sydney in Darlinghurst, and there was a piano in the foyer, a well-adorned piano, better adorned than perhaps tuned and taken care of. But I was with my friends and I was just playing a little bit of a standard. My friend decided to become a chip percussionist and just started in. So it was all very spontaneous and hilarious.
That's just so lovely. Well, we see in so many forums and piano teachers bemoaning students that turn up with great ears. And I think it's largely because they don't know what to do with them, which is understandable because if you just use a read-play approach, it's really hard if they don't read well. So what do you do with your students around this?
Sorry, regarding, I missed that.
Yeah, so around if they're doing a lot of playing by ear or playing by ear rather than reading, do you have a couple of little
Yes, my tips, I am a mad fan of, for early kids, the app Note Rush, because that, along with explaining the G clef and F clef, interval reading, definitely the bomb, and using Note Rush gets them used to identifying intervals, and better than that, they can do it at home, because often with reading, it's the in-between lessons they need to be doing. I will try and incorporate a little bit of sight reading into each lesson, and motivation. Like if a student really, really loves a piece that they're not possible to do by ear, I try and track that down so they will read it. So lots of different ways. I also wish the piano lessons were like 18 hours each.
Yeah, we all do. So Mr. Jam in. So, Leonie, you've also written some compositions probably inspired by your students. So we've got a video of Leonie talking about her music now.
I'm so excited to be speaking to Leonie Cohen about her compositions. You have had some commissions by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Tell us about that.
Wonderful. First of all, lovely to be here, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. I'm a jazz piano player, and the ABC very kindly has commissioned me to do 2 albums with one was with my jazz trio, piano, double bass and drums, called Sideshow Pony, original pieces. And the other one was a really beautiful and interesting one, commissioned to do original arrangements of traditional Jewish material. Hava Nagila, how you have never heard it before.
I can't imagine. Is that on YouTube or Spotify or something like that?
Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And
so how do they find you on Spotify?
Leonie Cohen. And
Easy.
Don't spell it as Leonard, because there's this other guy out there who tries to get all my...
Good on you. And we are very excited that Blackrock Music is now selling some of your compositions as well.
Equally excited. So I do a lot of teaching, which I absolutely love, in recent days, I've been teaching students who are quite accomplished classical players jazz, but I've also written a lot of compositions for early students who, at the stages where they're being taught scales, I've implemented them in really accessible pieces, great to teach them by example, and wrote, reference the music after. And I thought I'd call it Scales Schmales.
That's brilliant. Well, let's have a listen to a couple of those. Wow, that last one, that's an E minor, isn't it?
That is E minor. So I've written them to loosely follow AMEB grades. So that is a bunch of scales that are in the preliminary syllabuses.
Fantastic. And teachers can get those, and they can choose to just buy a single sheet, or they can get a studio license.
Yes,
They
studio
can...
tends to be really popular because that way teachers just have to purchase it once. Some teachers end up splitting that cost very easily amongst their students, and then they can send as many copies as they want to their students.
Brilliant. And you've got another one called Sight Reading Blues. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, that was a fun one. I wrote that quite a long time ago for several reasons, and one was a lot of students ask at a very early stage, can they learn jazz? So I wrote this as a very accessible entry blues, 12-bar blues. It's got a really lovely fast, cool run. And the very last bit of it, which is only a B major chord in your right hand, allows students to improvise or play around with playing the chord differently. And a lot of my students, early intermediate, late beginner love it, but as do the more advanced students who have not played jazz before.
I really like that that B major chord at the end, because you can do arpeggio or all sorts of things with it. It's really fantastic. Let's have a look at that.
Well, as Paul said, Leonie's music is available from blackrockmusic.com.au and blackrockmusic.co.uk, and it's digital, so we can, if you're anywhere in the world, you can purchase Leonie's music. Well, our next question comes from Christine Mulhall, who lives in lovely Noosa Heads. And last weekend, we got a photo, because last weekend I was there with my husband having a bit of a break, and I took this photo on a walk. Beautiful Noosa. It's lovely. Well, anyway, back to our question. Christine asks, what's the main things that an examiner looks for when deciding on marking of an exam piece? Should an exam piece always be paid with the pedal exactly as marked, or is a performer able to adjust this? If the student makes a mistake and cannot go on and needs to go back to the beginning or back to where they are able to pick the piece up from, should they ask permission, or should they just go straight back without any further ado? Stuart, what are examiners looking for here?
Wow, that's a big question. There's nearly a whole seminar for each part of that question. Okay, number one is musicality. Number two is continuity. Number three is confidence. all examining boards have a list of examining criteria that examiners are obliged to adhere to. And in the terms of AME-B, that criteria is published in the manual as the syllabus objectives. So for any teacher out there who is teaching AME-B and you haven't made yourself familiar with the syllabus objectives, please do so, because they are the objectives that we need to be looking at when we are teaching, and they are the objectives that the examiner will measure that candidate's performance against. In terms of rock school, it's a little more clear cut. Just going back onto AME-B, for Piano for Leisure, there is something like in excess of 20 little objectives for each part of the exam. And what Rock School have done is they've clarified that and condensed that down into just 4 objectives. And the 4 objectives for Rock School are command of the instrument, rhythm and sync, if there's a backing track, being able to play along with a backing track, notation accuracy, and confidence in presentation or communication. So they're the 4 things. And really, when you look at the AME-B criteria as well, even though the AME-B drill down further and they put more points in there, essentially it's the same 4 things that we are looking for. We're looking for command of the instrument, we're looking for musicality, we're looking for confidence and continuity, and we're listening for the ability to communicate and to sell that piece of music.
So really, these are performance exams. So for our guests, for our viewers that are joining us from America, if you don't do exams over there, because you don't have the exam culture that the rest of the world seems to have, these are just fantastic points for anyone preparing for recitals, for Stedfords and competitions. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think we need to bear in mind as well that there are very few pieces of music that have been written specifically for an exam. They're all pieces of music which have been written for cultural enjoyment, and we need to actually make sure that our students are understanding that they're not playing an exam piece. They're not just going through the motions. They're actually playing. It's an art form that we're engaged in, and we have to be able to sell that art form convincingly and make that piece of music sound as if it's the best piece of music that they've ever played. Exactly. And if they really get into it, then yeah, it's a pleasure to hear. Examiners can hear a piece of music which has been played with conviction, as opposed to one which has been sort of learnt under duress. I really hate this piece. If they hate it, they're not going to play it well. It's just not going to happen.
It's true.
So to move on to the next point with the pedaling, my teacher always encouraged me to pedal by ear. He said, ignore the marking on there. Take the marking on there as an indication, but don't follow it slavishly, because there's too many variables in pedaling.
So would it be important to, particularly in a younger exam, to actually notate the pedal markings that the student is going to use?
Yeah, I think so. But we need to bear in mind as well that for level 1 exams in AME-B, pedal is not expected in any case. Even if the piece is marked with pedaling, it's not marked as such. However, if they do attempt the pedaling and it's done badly, then the examiner would be within their rights to comment. So yeah, but with the pedaling, it's even text editions. The pedaling is actually quite inexact if you think of it. It's very ambiguous, and there's too many variables. So yes, feel free to change the pedaling, but always keep in mind the musical effect. We don't want blurriness, we don't want chopping of the sound. The pedal has to enhance the piece and not detract from it.
Good. Dorothy, how do you help your students with this point?
Yeah, I agree with Stuart. And with regard to the question on pedaling, definitely for younger students, I think I agree with what Gillian said about notating it down and marking it in and explaining, okay, when you do it this way, this is the sound, and always relate it to the sound. So the student understand what we have worked out for them and relating it to the outcome. But at the higher level, that's where Stuart recommendation, go with your ears, because the room that you practiced in today would be different from the one you're taking in the exam. The piano would be different. So those variables, and if they just stick slavishly to what is marked on the score, their ears might hear something that tells them, oh, this is too much pedal for this room. But in their mind, they might think, but my teacher tells me I must do it like that. Yeah. Whereas if you have trained them to listen to the sound and adapt to different depth, to different amount of pedal used, then the child, right from the start, and as they move up to the higher level, and as they tackle more difficult pieces, they are trained, their ears are trained to catch on to how the pedal enhance the music. The earlier part of the question about do you stop when you make a mistake? I would say no. Yeah. It's like having a pimple on your face. You focus on it. If you focus on the pimple on your face, then you're telling the world, look at this pimple. No, so I would say look at the whole picture. Yeah. And when you think your face is beautiful in spite of that pimple, yeah, you're telling your listener that yes, it is not perfect. It might be a few blemish, but that blemish does not kill the overall effect of the music. And that's where what Stuart said about continuity, the confidence, the musicality, the big picture, you're still able to present and go on in spite of little imperfections. But that's okay. As you play more, your piece will improve.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's so true. Well, if you're looking to help your students achieve their best results, it all starts with first impressions. And the first thing that everyone does on an exam is scales. And the best way to get your students up to speed with their scales and exam scales is through Practice Buddy. So here's Paul to tell you all about it.
If you're teaching for exams and you're finding it challenging to get your students practicing those scales, broken chords and arpeggios, you're going to want to start using backing tracks. But you'll need to have the correct version of the scale, broken chord or arpeggio for every different exam syllabus. Luckily, Piano Teaching Success Practice Buddy has exactly that. Your students can get a Practice Buddy student pass, which has everything your student needs to excel at scales, broken chords and arpeggios. The adjustable speed backing tracks are set at exam speed and can be slowed down in the early stages of learning. Tracks have been harmonically constructed so that fragment learning and repetition is built in. That means you can teach just one concept. It might be playing one fragment of a scale, broken chord or arpeggio so that your student can repeat that one thing several times as the track plays. Repetition. Playing with backing tracks makes it so easy, but shh, your students will be having so much fun they won't even realise. Being able to see the full list of exam scales in one glance gives your students and their parents a really good idea of how much learning is needed to be exam ready, and as teachers we know how important that is. The downloadable Fast Track Scale Kits have many ways for students to learn their scales, which means every student's learning style is catered for. Everything from fingering charts and full colour graphical notation to flashcards and success charts will help you and your students keep track of what they're up to. This whole body learning approach makes scales and technical work fun for all learners in a multi-sensory way. When you use Practice Buddy in your studio, you'll be teaching scales like an expert. When your students are playing along with Practice Buddy at home, in no time at all, they'll be playing like an expert and having fun. Teachers, you're going to want to access all the levels, so we've bundled together the student passes for each exam syllabus together in your own special teacher pass. Any of the passes can be purchased in one of 9 currencies, and student passes are great value in your currency for just £19 in the UK or $31 in Australia. The teacher bundle is amazing value at £77 in the UK or $127 in Australia, and they're all available at pianoteachingsuccess.com. This month, when you purchase a Practice Buddy annual teacher pack, you'll receive a special gift from us of 2 annual student passes valued at £19 or $31 each. Student passes allow your students to practice using the Practice Buddy at their place. They'll have all the exam materials that I've told you about at home. Once they start using it, you'll be amazed at how quickly your students learn their scales. I know, I've been using it with my students for years. Choose the Practice Buddy Annual Teacher Pass for the syllabus that you teach, and you'll receive all 5 levels from initial or preliminary through to grade 4, as well as 2 bonus annual student passes for your students. The whole pack is valued at $189 or £115, and it's yours for just $127 Australian or £77, or choose your own currency to purchase in. Practice Buddy is the best way to learn scales, but if you've used it with your students and you don't like it, let us know in 7 days and we'll give you a full refund. The Practice Buddy is available at Piano Teaching Success. So what are teachers saying about the Practice Buddy? Well, Heather Watson from Perth says, students immediately pay more attention when I produce the scale backing tracks. I'm using them right from the beginning of introducing scales. It helps establish a steady beat from the outset. We often just listen and tap along before even playing. It's also easier to discuss major and minor modes while listening. And Mary Ashenden from Adelaide says, I love having everything easily accessible in each grade for each exam and not having to go and check the exam syllabus all the time. So if you'd like Practice Buddy for you and your students, check it out at pianoteachingsuccess.com and click on the Practice Buddy link.
Well, we want to bring you panelists and segments in our shows that help with the challenges that you're facing in your piano studio. So like we do many times, we'd love to have the answer to this question. So when it comes to piano teaching, what's your greatest challenge? So if you're watching us live, just type your answer in the chat section. Now it's you click the chat box just down the bottom and the little chat section opens up. So our question again is, when it comes to piano teaching, what's your greatest challenge? Just jot down whatever comes to mind. Well, whilst you're putting your answer in the chat, let's hear some music of Stuart Storer. This piece is called Waltz, and it's from the Amy B. Manual List Grade 2 level, and it's available from Blackrock Music. That was lovely, Stuart. We've actually had a number of couple of points in there. That one actually had a beautiful backing track to it, and there are a couple of comments about from Jeanette and from Leonie about some of the students are often finding it difficult to play if they've got weak ears or weak rhythm. They find it hard to play with backing tracks, and sometimes that's actually in the how you chunk it down for them. And we've actually addressed that a little bit in our Facebook Live. In the Facebook group this week, we did a poll on what topics you'd like to see covered, and the winner got a Facebook Live segment, and the winner was how to make online teaching fun and effective. Paul and I went live a couple of days ago in the group, and if you'd like to see it, you can pop over to the Piano Teaching Success Facebook group. If you're not a member, just click join group, and we'd love to welcome you in. Here's a sneak peek about what we did. Our number one strategy on making piano teaching fun and effective was gamify and using multi-sensory and make it also using backing tracks. And we talk a little bit about chunking it down for backing tracks. We might give you a couple of clues, because that normal approach of playing right hand, playing the left hand all the way through, it can be just taking on too much for a child that hasn't got the rhythm so much. And in that video, there's a teaching example of someone just doing exactly that. And of course, using chunking and fragment teaching. So here's a little snippet of our segment. So we can break up the visual monotony by wearing some fun things, like by wearing a bright top. This girl in this photo has a bright colored blue top on. We could wear bright colored scarves. We could even do something like a colourful hat, occasionally different things, different weeks. Or we could even have something like a hat or glasses or something that signify that we're moving to a different type of subject. So like the glasses might be when we're going to do theory, and you got to ham it up here because you are on TV.
That's right, and that's a really important thing. You actually got to be changing the visual stimulation all the time. So I'm sure you probably all watch the news or even any of the morning shows. They're constantly changing direction and stuff. So it's because the brain actually gets really bored.
Well, that's enough for our spoilers. So pop on over to the group and watch our teaching segment in there, and there's heaps of ideas that you can use in your studio straight away. Well, earlier in the show, we mentioned that Dorothy has written some books, and she has her Theory Explorer books for beginner theory, which are lovely full color books. Can you hold them up, Dorothy, so we can see them?
Okay, there are two books. So this is Theory Explorer 1 and Theory Explorer 2. So inside, there are lots of activities and colorful. So students get to write. There's also stickers. So the stickers are a big selling point because kids love to paste the stickers. But we also engage them through writing, through coloring, through games, through the old format of fill in the blanks. Yeah, all these activities to reinforce music theory. And the idea is after 2 books, the students are ready for grade 1. Yeah, and it's suitable for the ages of 4 years old to 6 years old, so preschoolers who are just starting out on piano.
Oh, great. So we'll put a link in the show notes to how you can get in contact with those books, and Dorothy if you need to. And also, Dorothy, you've written some piano pedagogy books, and here's Dorothy to explain those books.
The piano pedagogy questions and answer is written for piano students out there who intend to take the piano teaching diploma exams, as well as for existing piano teachers out there who wish to boot camp and recharge their piano teaching. Let me go through piano pedagogy, the questions. It is written as a workbook, meaning that there is ample space for teachers to put down their thoughts directly into the book. And as you teach through the years of teaching, you can always revisit your questions because your students are always changing, and through the years, the behavior, the psychology, the profile of your students will change. And some of the topics covered here are beginning lessons, how to handle parents, teaching adults, tutor books, paddling, repertoire, the approach to skills, arpeggios, studies, technique, how to improve oral sight reading. So the answers are model answers, are sample answers of my own thoughts and reflection on the questions.
And we'll put a link in the show notes so that you can get those books from Dorothy. Well, that's all we've got time for today. I'd like to thank Dorothy Chia, Leonie Cohen, and Stuart Storer for being with us today. It's been a fabulous show. Thank you, everybody. As always, you can join our watch list and receive the episodes straight to your inbox, or you can catch the replay on our Facebook group. We're going to be back in 2 weeks' time with a show that promises to be interesting as we explore to exam or not to exam. That's the question. Well, we love questions. So make sure you send one in to us. There's 3 ways you can do that. You can send us an email. You can post it in our Piano Teaching Success Facebook group, or you can click the Ask a Question on the episode page in pianoteachingsuccess.com. I'd like to thank Paul Myatt, who's been producing today's show and is responsible for the videos and all the behind-scenes tech. We're going to go out today to the music of Stuart Storer playing Questions, which is from his album Piano Diversions, which is available in digital format from blackrockmusic.com.au and blackrockmusic.co.uk. On behalf of all of us, stay well, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.